Hello and welcome to the DSR Daily. I'm David Rothkopf. I'm one of your hosts. The other hosts are Riley Fessler. Hey, Riley, how are you?
I'm not too bad.
Excellent. And Minna Stein. How are you today, Minna?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm very happy because getting towards the end of the week, how many more days of horrible stories can we have? And I looked at the weather report and it's supposed to be like nearly 80 tomorrow and the next day here. Finally, a return to normal human weather. And I know that we don't do a weather report here, and we're only in Washington, D.C., but I'm looking forward. Maybe it's because, it's like I'm old and my old bones, they need warmth. But I saw you smile, Minna, because you're Floridian. And so you probably are looking forward to it also.
I I am looking forward to it. Make American weather great again? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Make global warming. No, never mind. Okay, Minna, you start us off with something horrible.
Okay. President Trump criticized Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, demanding his removal and urging the Fed to cut interest rates following Powell's warning that Trump's tariffs could disrupt economic stability. On Truth Social, Trump posted, quote, Powell's termination cannot come fast enough. Powell emphasized the Fed's independence, stating it would make decisions without political influence despite Trump's pressure. Experts expressed concern that Trump's attacks could undermine the Fed's credibility and global confidence in the U.S. dollar. Meanwhile, Trump continued to push for lower rates, citing falling oil prices and tariffs as reasons, while the European Central Bank cut rates amid economic uncertainty.
Yeah, look, remember the Independent Department of Justice? That's not here anymore. Remember the independent IRS? I mean, 2 days ago, Trump said, let's get rid of Harvard's nonprofit status. And yesterday, the story was the IRS is looking into getting rid of Harvard's nonprofit status, even though literally there's no grounds for them to do that. So the independent IRS looks like it's probably gone. And that's, that's what authoritarians do. The independence of the Fed has always irritated Trump. Powell, who Trump appointed, by the way, doing the right thing and behaving in a responsible way, makes him crazy. So he'll figure out a way to get rid of it. And there's a Supreme Court case bubbling up about the ability of the president to get rid of the head of independent agencies, which, the court will probably let him do it. And if that happens, Powell's days are numbered. The independence of the Fed is numbered. But that's not what's most important here, because I bet a lot of you are sitting around listening to this going, I don't care whether the Fed's independent, or I don't know what that means for me. What it means is people will trust the dollar less. They will trust the U.S. economy less. They will see the U.S. economy as being manipulated, our books being cooked, just like all Trump books end up being cooked. And this will ultimately be very damaging for the U.S. One of many damaging things, but this could have really profound, lasting consequences. Riley.
Elon Musk, SpaceX, along with Palantir and Anduril, are leading contenders to build key components of President Trump's Golden Dome missile defense system, which aims to protect the U.S. from missile threats. The proposed plan involves deploying hundreds of satellites to detect and track missiles with a separate fleet armed to intercept them, though the project is still in early stages. SpaceX has suggested an unusual subscription-based model for its role, raising concerns among some Pentagon officials about long-term control and costs. While the initiative could mark a major shift towards Silicon Valley's involvement in defense contracting, traditional firms like Boeing and Lockheed Martin remain key competitors.
Yeah, I wonder how this is going to turn out, right? I mean, they wouldn't do anything corrupt, would they, Riley?
No, certainly not.
Certainly not. And, there would be a big outcry from people. But, before we get to the corruption, which this is obviously heading towards, there is one other thing. And, our friends like John Wolfstall and Joe Cirincione on this show mentioned this multiple times, this is not technically feasible. What Trump wants to do, provide a dome like the one, the Iron Dome over Israel, an anti-missile system, won't work because the U.S. is just too big. The Israeli system covers a very, very, very small geographical area. This would be technically impossible, huge, and now it looks like it could also end up being corrupt. But of course, when you do a corrupt project, it doesn't really matter whether the end result gets delivered. The real objective is to direct billions of dollars to your friends and their companies, which you can do whether the project is any good or not. That's where we're headed on this. It's outrageous. And it's even more outrageous when, you take items out of yesterday's news or today's news or the day before's news in which you see that, food stamps, the SNAP program is going to be eliminated. Head Start programs are going to be eliminated. Programs to protect people from disease are going to be eliminated. But impossible programs that only end up producing greater wealth for Trump and Musk and their friends, those will continue. This government is not against waste, fraud, and abuse. It's about creating waste, fraud, and abuse.
The Trump administration is considering revoking Harvard University's tax-exempt status amid a broader political dispute over the school's resistance to federal policy demands, particularly regarding how it addresses anti-Semitism. President Trump has publicly criticized Harvard, suggesting it acts as a political entity and should be taxed accordingly, while the education secretary and IRS officials are reportedly reviewing the matter. Experts note that revoking a university's tax exemption is rare, typically follows a lengthy audit process, and could spark a legal battle in federal courts.
Could. I saw a number yesterday that like 140 sitting judges are Harvard Law School graduates. Harvard has produced massive numbers of lawyers. Of course, it's going to produce a challenge in court, because if you look at the reasons you can take away tax-exempt status, none of them are present in Harvard. Harvard is not, taking views that warrant this. But I would point out one other thing in this attack by Trump on Harvard, and that is, nowhere in it does he mention anti-Semitism, which was the original premise. But they've just dropped all pretense. The reality is that what they're trying to achieve here is control over universities, who gets taught, what they get taught, and so forth. And it goes with another kind of ugly story where they're saying, give us the names of all of your foreign students, and are apparently considering eliminating Harvard's ability to educate foreign students, which would be disastrous for the school, disastrous for the country, and consistent with all the other disastrous policies that are currently being promulgated or executed.
Donald Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff and diplomat Marco Rubio will meet European officials in Paris to discuss ending the war in Ukraine, marking the highest-level transatlantic talks since February. European diplomats plan to push the U.S. to increase pressure on Russia for an unconditional ceasefire following recent deadly attacks on Ukrainian cities. The meetings, hosted by French President Emmanuel Macron, will include discussions on Ukraine's security and follow Witkoff's recent talks with Vladimir Putin. While Trump's administration seeks a ceasefire, tensions remain with Ukrainian President Zelensky, who insists Ukraine must be part of any peace deal.
So, Secretary of State Steve Witkoff and Assistant Secretary of State for Student Visas, Marco Rubio, are engaging in talks with people who don't trust them, who think they have ulterior motives, who know that Witkoff is carrying Putin's water. Should go real well. should really produce a great outcome. I'm not optimistic. By the way, I'm going to write something today on who's really what, in this administration, because it's clearly Witkoff who's got the lead on issues pertaining to state, just like it's clearly Peter Navarro and not the USTR who's doing our trade policy. That's, clearly Stephen Miller and not Kristi Noem who's running our homeland security efforts. We're starting to see the real structure of this administration as opposed to the nominal structure. And maybe I'll talk about that more tomorrow once I've written the article. Okay, surely there's one more story out there before we can go on about our daily business, energized by the insights of Riley and Minna.
All right, well, let's see if this energizes us. A federal judge has found probable cause to hold the Trump administration in criminal contempt for defying a court order to halt deportations under the Alien Enemies Act, which included removing over 100 migrants despite a judicial block. Judge James Boasberg criticized the administration's actions as deliberate and dismissive, citing social media posts from officials that mock the court's ruling and celebrated the deportations. Although the Supreme Court later overturned the injunction, Boasberg emphasized that the administration's willful disobedience still warrants potential prosecution and gave officials a final opportunity to propose how they might comply.
Yeah, they're not going to comply. I'm sure at the White House they were going, "Oh, look at that guy. We're not doing that." They're going to ignore these judges' rulings, and they're going to get away with it. And this is going to continue their war on the independence of the judiciary. See a theme here in all of our stories, and our movement towards an authoritarian state. Again, part of the themes of all of these stories and each day here. You can write it down. He is not going to achieve what normally would be achieved when a judge says this kind of thing. Anyway, we'll follow that. We'll follow everything else. Later today, we'll get together with Norm Ornstein for the kind of therapy session that you guys have all come to depend on. And if you didn't catch Deep State Radio yesterday podcast, it was a special podcast with one of our regulars, Ed Luce, to talk about his new book, Big, but more importantly, to talk about how people like Kissinger and Brzezinski would view the Trump administration. It was great. Ed was brilliant. The insights were the kind of insights you really need to have and the kind of reason why Deep State Radio is different from all the other things you might hear elsewhere in podcast land, because we do deep expert deep dives into policy issues and things that will have longer term consequences. And one of the things we talk about on the podcast is how global strategists will look at the U.S. following, the Trump administration. You really want to see it. You want to listen to us with Norm. You want to hear our latest Scylla Consciousness. You want to hear all our latest episodes. So become a member. If you're not a member, sign up at thedsrnetwork.com and help support this venture with, less than the price of a magazine subscription. And we'll be grateful. And we will be grateful. And we'll be back here tomorrow because today's only Thursday. So see you at one of those places or all of them soon. Bye.